feel like through the exploration of my body, of my sexuality, of my pleasure, I actually ended up growing so much more than I did of 25 years of more of an ascetic approach to spirituality. And
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Orgasmica, the podcast where we talk all about sexuality, sensuality, and all things healing. And today we have a man. Very of the few men that we have in this phase, I want more men to come into this space, conscious space, to talk about all these things. And today I'm so grateful to talk to Yossef. He is an expert in sacred sexuality, which you guys know that we talk all about here, but we also are going to talk about something delicious and amazing that I'm so looking forward to talk to, which is conscious kink. You're also an expert on conscious kink. And thank you for being in this space, Yossef.
it's such a pleasure being here, and even more so knowing that you haven't had a lot of men come through this space, so I feel particularly honored.
Yes, please send more. We need more conversations with conscious men, and that's something that I'm like so looking forward to. So also thank you for doing this work, because it is extremely needed. And I wanted to ask you how did you start doing this work and why?
Yeah, I came across personal development has always been a part of what I've done. It was something that I've, as young as I remember, I was always fascinated by the secrets of the universe and my own inner universe. Those were the two things that were most interesting to me. And so any study that would help me understand either of those or both was fascinating. And so I got into spirituality very young, was in personal development very young. I was on that path for a long time, but the path that I was on was also very limiting in a lot of ways. It was mostly more cerebral, more about sort of like learning and studying and that kind of work, and it wasn't very somatic. And another thing about it was it wasn't very embracing of sexuality, is what I would say, and to a certain degree repressive as well. And at a certain point in my life, I knew, like, it was actually like itching for a long time, but there was a certain point where I knew I needed to explore more. And then I got first into Tantra, then into other types of sacred sexuality, and eventually into conscious kink. And those are the things that really opened me up in a way that I was stuck for a very long time in the more traditional personal development and spiritual paths. I feel like through the exploration of my body, of my sexuality, of my pleasure, I actually ended up growing so much more than I did of 25 years of more of an ascetic approach to spirituality. And that blew me wide open. And so because it was always something that I've always taught personal development, but it's always been led from my own learning. I feel like my archetype of how I show up is I'm on my path of personal development, and if you want to join me on that path, I welcome you to join me, but I'm not coming here to sort of preach. I'm here learning for myself, and I love to share that with other people.
That's amazing. Where did you grow up?
Toronto. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I always like to know, because I know culture has a lot to do with how we experience or are taught about sex.
Yes.
In that kind of sense, you know, this community is very Latinos led, and
That's
so it has a lot of, it comes with a lot of like how we were taught or not taught. Also in the not talking about and putting on the taboo, we're being taught a lot of what sexuality is. What was the culture like when you grew up, when it came down to sexuality or sex conversations?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think I've been immersed in a lot of different cultures. I did grow up to an immigrant family in Toronto, but still the overall Canadian narrative is very much about being polite and being nice.
Yes.
That's what Canadians are all about. You got to be nice, and you've got to be polite. And that feeds very much into the nice guy syndrome that we see so many people suffer from. And that nice guy syndrome is usually built on partly on repression. It also doesn't really end up turning women on. It makes them feel safe, but without the turn on. And because men are repressed, they're actually not very safe because they have the desires and they're just pushing them aside. So that's that environment that I grew up on. But I was also mentioning to you before we started that I lived 6 years in Miami. And I was also very immersed in the Latin culture there, and that was very different, very bombastic, very open. And it was funny, I was actually, when I was on the dating apps, even after I came back to LA from Miami, I always used to say Toronto manners, Miami swagger.
I love that.
And I feel like the combination of those two cultures really informed me that there is this combination. In order to really create excitement and fun, you need to have the combination of the safety and the danger.
Yes.
Not just one.
100%.
If it's all danger, like I've seen it, like even when I would date, I dated a lot of Latino women when I was in Miami, and a lot of them, what they loved about me was the fact that I was like, oh, this is someone who's not going to blow up every time there's like an emotional thing, and like, oh, I feel safe here and be expressed. But at the same time, I brought all of the like sort of, I learned Spanish really quickly, and I brought that like what I picked up about the heat and the passion and the romance into other relationships as well. So I learned very quickly that the combination of those two factors is a key.
I love that. When you were talking about the nice guy syndrome, which is what I think you are saying is a lot of the women that are like choosing the bad boy, you know, over like the nice guy, and the nice guy is like, I'm fucking nice. Why are we like they're always gonna choose the bad boy motorcycle and like the guy, the fuck boy, right? Versus that. And you touch such a clear point that I want to talk about. What do you mean by like danger? Because it needs to be, in order to be sexual tension, there needs to be attention, right? There needs to be attention. How does a nice guy create attention without repressing necessarily who they are? Because you can be legitimately nice without repressing yourself.
Well, I want to talk about the difference between nice and kind.
Okay, yes. Okay, good.
Okay, so nice is usually something that's forced from outwards. It's a way that you're supposed to be, like Canadians, like you're supposed to be nice. And being nice is more about what is someone else going to think about me and how I want to show up. Kind is more, how do I want to take care of someone else? So there's room for kindness, but not niceness. Niceness is almost always toxic. And I think that what happens most of the time, and it's happened in our culture, we came from a world that was more built in machismo and in leading, like a man is someone who's aggressive, who takes what he wants. And there was something that was very sexy about that, but also something unsafe for women, especially in this growing age of when we understand that consent is so important. And a lot of men just violated women's consent. And a natural reaction to that was the Me Too movement, which was important in order to bring this idea of consent. But usually the pendulum swings in the complete other direction. And then it created a society of men who are very meek, who are very shy, who are very nice. And they're not really nice because they're kind, but they're nice because they think, oh, I need to be nice now because that's what the culture wants, that's what women want, so I'll behave nicely. But underneath that, they haven't really resolved what's going on underneath. They still want. Right?
And it still builds a lot of resentment, I feel like.
And it builds loads of resentment.
Yeah, that's why a lot of men are like resentful of the culture, not knowing like it's within of what's going on, because kindness and niceness, that is a beautiful way of putting it. So I love that you got a combination of the both of them. That's amazing. That's rare. And that's unbelievably amazing. And so then you discover Tantra, you discover that part. Did you discover it first for yourself, or you were thinking about implementing it into your teachings and the way that you were teaching?
Everything that I've ever done was first for myself. And it's also a very natural quality that I have, and I think a lot of other people have, that when there's something that's so groundbreaking in my life, I want to share it. So yes, I went to Tantra for myself. I felt the sexual repression in the community that I was in. And within me, the combination of both a very healthy sexual appetite and at the same time, like shame around it and guilt around it when I would follow it. And that didn't feel good inside of me. And to me, Tantra gave me permission to explore sexuality from a spiritual perspective. I was like, oh, I'm doing something spiritual, so I'm allowed to explore it. That felt a safer way than for me to just go to like a sex party. I was like, oh, if I go to Tantra, then I'm doing something spiritual. It was an excuse for it. But I found a lot in there when I was there. And that's when I first started having the somatic experience of energy in my body. This something that was so conceptual for me before became very embodied. like, wow, I can feel energy and it's sexual and I can feel it all through my body. And I can have an orgasm in my heart or in my third eye, and I can have multiple orgasms, and I can orgasm without ejaculating, and I can create energy orgasms for other people. Like, that was mind-blowing experience. So I naturally wanted to start teaching it. I was already doing coaching, and I was doing life coaching and business coaching. And I was like, eventually these two worlds are going to come together, but I didn't know when it was going to be or how it was going to happen. And that naturally evolved eventually.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think a lot of people, it was interesting that you said shame, because a lot of people don't think that, they think a lot of women have shame for having that sexual appetite and being like, no, 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 and like the idea of women don't have as much libido or as much sexual energy as men.
Which is a lie.
Which is absolutely a lie.
Yes.
But I don't hear a lot of men expressing that they feel shame for having that appetite. Where did that come from, and how did that express itself?
I guess for me it was even more guilt than shame, although there was some shame in it as well. It was more guilt after the fact. So I actually got excited by my sexual energy, but then when I would engage, because of the society I grew up in, the community I grew up in, and its relationship to sexuality, I was like, oh, now I had sex, and now I feel guilty around having done that to a certain degree, because I'm in this community and I'm teaching a certain thing, and then I'm behaving differently maybe than what they teach. So those things created that feeling of guilt inside of me, and I didn't love feeling guilty after I had a beautiful connection with someone else.
Yes. When somebody, because I had the same experience of being like, I was very sexual, and then my sexuality got cut off for a lot of hormonal reasons and things like that. And my entrance to Tantra was that it's like I had to discover sexuality in a different way. And discovering orgasms in a different way, and discovering like this energy of creation in a different way. When somebody wants to know a little bit more or wants to get into this space, what would you tell them?
In Tantra specifically? Be very careful.
That's a good one. That's a freaking good one. Yeah.
There are so many schools out there, and there's a lot
Yep.
of predators in a lot of those
Yes.
places. And that's true across
Everything.
any spirituality
Yeah.
or any group that you go into. There's people with power
Yep.
are always going to use that
To
in
their
order
own
to take
thing.
advantage of other
Yes.
people. And it's extra tricky when you're exploring sexuality.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who are in power there who do that,
Yep.
who have those positions,
Yes.
partly because of the way they want to be seen, and
Yes.
it's their own ego that's building up, and partly to have access to people that don't know what they're doing and
Exactly.
to take advantage of them.
100%. What do you think people should look out for? Meaning, like when you're drawn into a teacher or a space of Tantra, what are good signs and what are bad signs?
That's a great question. So generally, I almost always prefer going to female teachers than male teachers. It's not infallible, and there's plenty of corrupt female teachers as well. But if there was, generally speaking, I would say that there are more female teachers who are doing it in a way that with integrity in the tantric world.
Yeah.
Also someone who has a really good, like, do the Google searches. You're
Yeah.
going to find
Yeah.
the information. If there's
Yeah.
any controversies, you'll find it very quickly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Google search the person, see what's there. And then there's some people who have a legacy of like a long time of learning and transmitting really good wisdom, and follow those people.
Yeah. That's a beautiful thing. Listen to that, people. I always say that. I'm like, be very careful who you take it with, because it's a very strong energy, and a lot of people do take advantage.
And it's one thing, the fact that they take advantage, but the transmission is less pure.
Yeah.
Because there's some teachers who are really good
Yeah.
teachers, but they're not really embodied in their teaching.
Exactly. Well, that's 100%, thousand. Like, you have to be embodied on the thing.
So you're not getting the transmission from them if they're not in integrity with what they're teaching.
Yes, absolutely. I love that you said that. All right, well, let's jump into the delicious one I'm most excited about, which is conscious kink. How did you went from Tantra, which is like this exploration that you had and like trying to teach this and like being mind blown by like, okay, spirituality combines with sexuality, you know, because a lot of the times that's the problem. I feel like that's the issue, that we have separated ourselves from our sexuality, hence our spirituality and everything that we do from our sexuality and sexual energy. And then kink has become even something more that is like underground, even more taboo than sexuality, even more so, right? There's like dungeons and things, and like you do it like over here underneath where nobody knows, and like the CEO that like does this in secret, and like all these things. That movies also had something to do with like making it even, you know, like in that space and not showing it a different type of ways. So what is conscious kink?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Well, I guess I'll answer both parts of it. There's the fact that, you know, exploring in the tantric world had a lot of benefits to it, and understanding energies and all of that. But at the same time, one of the shadows that I saw there was this spiritual bypassing around shadow work, that a lot of it wasn't done. Kink lives in the shadows. Now, what kink does, the definition of something that's kinky, it's something that you are ashamed of and turned on by at the same time. That's shadow work. We're bringing our pleasure into our darkest area, and we're playing with it. So what's the difference between conscious kink and unconscious kink, or just any other kink, right? Is that sometimes if we're not, all consciousness is having an awareness of why we're doing what we're doing and what we're doing as we're doing it. That's what consciousness is. So conscious kink means that I'm not just stepping into the dungeon over and over again, and it's some type of addiction that I'm feeding, and I don't know why I'm doing it. I have a compulsion to do it, and I follow it. There's nothing wrong with just playing with kink, but if you're doing anything compulsively, then you're not really going to grow from it, and it can start developing to be some type of addictive behavior. Conscious kink means I'm stepping into this container, being aware of the shame that exists here, being aware of the other facets of myself that I'm bringing into it, and there's some type of self-awareness that I'm looking to gain through this process. Doesn't mean that I have to rid myself of my desires. It's not that I meant to like let it go, but that as I'm doing them, that I grow from it. And then maybe I want to explore something new. Maybe I do more of the same, but I know why I'm doing it. So it's just bringing awareness to the practice of kink makes it conscious.
Bringing awareness of the conscious kink. So living in that part of the shame. So because in shadow work, right, one of the things that we explore is that, okay, I'm ashamed of this thing, so I'm going to kind of put it in the light. So it doesn't consume me, and it doesn't negatively impact me, but I can still put it in the light. By putting it in the light, like taking, I guess, the kink out of the darkness and putting it a little bit in the light, does that change? Does that change my perception of it? Does that change me in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. So do you want to practice with a real world example?
Yeah.
Can I ask you, is there anything that you feel, it doesn't have to be now, but maybe in the past, that there was something that was shameful and you brought to the light?
Yes. I think a couple of things. I can think of a couple of things in sexuality, and they don't necessarily have to be kinks per se, but first off, just like being sexual was like in my culture was just like not looked upon, and I had a lot of like labels, you know, like whore to sexual to this to that, and like puta and like all the things that I could be labeled as, and so claiming myself doing this podcast was out of a shadow, coming out of a shadow of being like and naming this when my family is like ashamed of even the name of my podcast.
That's right.
Being like, holy shit, no, why would you do that? And my dad is like, my friends aren't gonna know, and like it's kind of like culturally shameful. And so actually the first time that I put this podcast, the first day that I had the podcast out, I lost my voice. Like I literally like physically lost my voice, and so that was something that I was ashamed. But the other thing, I guess, it could be like I was attracted to a woman, you know, and I really like from a place of like I could fall in love with this person, and I had my whole life being, you know, straight. Or thinking that I just fit one specific box, and liking a woman meant so many things in my shadow because of, again, my culture. Like I fully accept LGBTQ, but what happened within me is like, what does that mean about me?
That's right. So these are both great examples of what happens when we put the light into the shadows. What happens is that when something's still in the shadows and there's parts of myself that I feel ashamed about, that I feel don't belong, then I try and cut them out. Mm-hmm. And I try and like hide them, and I try and repress them. And the whole idea of personal development is moving towards wholeness. But how can you ever be whole if you're constantly trying to cut the bad parts of you away?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what conscious kink does is saying, no bad parts. Mm-hmm. This is a permission field. With consent, you can bring any part of yourself into this space. The part of you that's horny, the part of you that's bisexual, the part of you that's angry, the part of you that's sadistic, the part of you that's a victim. There's room for all of those parts. And when we create a safe space for all of those parts to be loved, they get integrated. And that integration work actually makes us more whole. We have access to more parts of ourselves, so how we show up in the world is more powerful. And that's the benefit of doing the shadow work, and that's the beauty of conscious kink, that it allows us to do this deep type of shadow work that's in an embodied state, not just intellectual.
Right.
We practice it, we step into it, and that becomes very healing to explore all these parts of myself and say, I love you, and I love you, and I love you, and I love you, and you all belong inside of me. How can we work together instead of fighting each other?
I love that. Yeah, it becomes an integration of your wholeness instead of a separation of like, I'm going to show up in this space like this and in another space like that, and like mutating myself in order to fit into different spaces.
Right, because how did it feel to claim this title and claim the fact that you love women and compare how you show up in the world now versus how you showed up in the world before?
100%, yeah. It's like the integration of all of it. And for me, it was I had it very separated because I'm also in the entertainment industry. So I'm also an actor, writer, producer. And so I didn't feel like I could do this work. Because in that other space, I was taken advantage of for my sexuality.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I have to cut that part off of my work, how I show up to meetings and how I show up to that, because they're gonna use it against me. They're gonna weaponize it.
Isn't it crazy that society at the same time both represses and exploits women's sexuality?
Yes.
Isn't that such a mindfuck?
It is such a mindfuck. It is absolutely such a mindfuck, especially in that industry. You know what I mean? Especially in the entertainment industry, where it's like, it's all about like, yeah, be your gorgeous, like, you know, self, and this stereotype, and like the sexual woman. They sexualize women since they're like almost like teenage, like barely teenagers, you know? And then
We've
at
all
the same
seen
time.
Sábado Gigante and all
Yes,
those
exactly.
shows. Yes,
It's not like you got that all the thing. I mean, I grew up with telenovelas, you
Yes.
know, and that's like so very sexualized women. And at the same time, like you show up into the actual world like that. And then men, you know, take that as like, or took that in my space as baiting me, you know. It's like, oh, you're like that? Okay, well then come over here, you know, sleep with me. Like, I'm going to fuck you. And I'm like, that's not an invitation. This is not an invitation. Right. You know, who I am is not an invitation for you to like come into my space like that. And so I repressed that for a long time. And I was like, okay, I'm going to wear like this things. And as a producer, I'm not going to be taken seriously if I like wear this, right? So I'm just going to wear the pantsuit and the things, and I'm not going to be sexual at all. And like, I divided myself. So when this work started coming through me, I immediately did an Instagram that had no my name at all, right? So it's like Sacred Alchemia has no Virginia. And at first it didn't have my face in it. It was just images. And, the more I started like integrating it, I still wouldn't tell people on this side, like, oh, this is what I do too. And I wouldn't tell people on this side, oh, I also do movies. Like I had them so separated.
Two parts of yourself.
Two parts of myself.
Don't let them touch each other.
Exactly. I was like, they can't touch each other because this cannot fit here and this cannot fit there. And in a ceremony, I had like a very strong of like, you have to combine them. You have to, this is who you are always. You know, like, why are you dividing yourself, you know? And it was because a lot of shame and a lot of shadow that I had put into sexuality. Interestingly enough, I was teaching sexuality, and yet I still had sexuality shadow within it, you know, which was like, yes, I can teach you over here, but like, I cannot put my name out there that I'm teaching this. And so it was not until I actually was able to combine, and then I actually felt not only more whole, but I can, you know, the things that I'm producing now have to be with women's sexuality and women empowerment, because now I feel like I'm conscious of it all, you know?
Yeah.
And so the things that I'm acting in, I'm saying no to a lot of the things because I'm like, no, if I'm teaching this, I cannot do this and like represent women that are like
That's great.
behaving like this.
And it's great to bring into the world a representation of women's sexuality through a woman's lens instead
Right.
of through a man's interpretation
Exactly.
of what it is, which is more about his desires
Yes.
and fantasies rather than what's real for a woman.
Yes. Ooh, yes. You speaking?
Mm.
Like more. That's why more women need to be behind the lens. You
That's
know?
right.
We need that representation of it. Oh,
And it'll teach men better as well.
yes.
Because it just creates this cycle of men creating the content, men consuming the content, and then there is this belief that men have around women's sexuality and what it looks like. We don't get a great representation of
No.
it. So I'm glad that you're doing the work you're doing.
Thank you. You know what's interesting? There was just a study that came out that Gen Z does not want to see sex scenes at all in movies. And they're like, we're not interested. So like, take them out, you know? And it was interesting. And somebody did an interview, was like, well, it's also because movies have unrepresented sex for so many decades, you know?
Yes.
It's like, it's very not real and truth of what actually happens, you know? It's like, you kiss me and all of a sudden, oh, and I'm having an orgasm, you know? But like, just like that, you know? And like the representation of it, it's more the gaze of the male within it than the actual representation of what sex is or can be, you know? So I find that very interesting, and like, how will that change media in the future for that? So when someone wants to practice conscious kink, because you express it in a way of like what it means as a whole, but now we still have the word kink in it,
Yes.
right? What does that mean, and how do we practice it? Do you feel like we all have kinks?
Yes. Yes, and. So there's kink and there's BDSM, and they're related and they're not exactly the same thing. Kink is, like I said, it's anywhere in your life where the combination of shame and pleasure work together. It's taboo. And that's very personal. You know, there's some, like one type of kink is fetish,
Yeah.
where someone has one particular way of getting off, like a foot fetish, for instance. But that's very personal. Like if someone has only always had doggy style sex, then missionary might feel kinky to them, although that's not kinky for most people. Within kink lives the world of BDSM, which is specific and plays also with the idea of power dynamics.
Yes.
And not all kink is about power dynamics, but the world of BDSM is where a lot of conscious kink actually happens because there's so much structure that's built around it. BDSM needs to be very well negotiated ahead of the play. And that level of communication and trust building and connection allows for a deeper excavation and exploration.
I love that you said that, because I love learning from all types of community, and one of the things that I have learned from BDSM is the communication is just so beautifully, specifically detailed that I feel like people that don't even practice BDSM, like monogamous couples, I'm like, they need to just apply that level of communication into their lives, because there's so many assumptions in sexuality
Yeah.
without conversation, right? Of things, or like, oh, one day this person did this and I liked it that day, but like, I
Yes.
might not like it today, you know what I mean? Or like, I might enjoyed what he did to me 10 years ago, but not anymore. But people get into a rhythm, into a specific type of sex, right? And then when they wanna explore something else, they wanna go to the like extreme of it. When all of a sudden they have these monogamous couples, they're like, we have done the same positions for 10 years and now we're six, so now we're gonna be swingers, you know? They're like just gonna go to the opposite way without doing that internal work of like communication, of like, what is it that you want? And so I love that what it starts with, like really deeply communication. So then you can play, right? Is that the point?
Well, yes, and I loved everything that you said about this. I think a lot of people, there's nothing wrong with bringing other people into your dynamic if it's something that everybody wants and it's consensual. I think that can be really beautiful. But again, anything that's done unconsciously will work against you. So if you're only swinging for the sake of variety, it's because, oh, I do this one thing with this one person. What if I do this same one thing with other people? That's one way to bring variety, but you're going to get stuck into the same situation. Kink opens up this whole world of variety that you can bring inside the relationship or bring other people into, but it's a whole other world. And that's what it's probably the bread and butter of what I do. Yes, I work as a Dom, and I throw parties and I teach workshops. But the majority of the work that I do is probably with monogamous couples looking to recapture polarity. And I use kink because of the communication, because it creates polarity, and because, yes, it has a lot of novelty to it, and it brings a lot of new things into the space. And you can like slip in the tantric and all that other stuff behind the scenes because you are being present and you're having that connection. You bring the energetics into it. That all can live in that world. And that's why conscious kink is my favorite framework for rebuilding polarity in couples.
When you talk about polarity, explain to people what that
Yes.
is and why that is so important.
Yes, absolutely. So polarity is like a magnet. You need to have a plus and a minus to create attraction. Two pluses repel each other, two minuses repel each other. And the tantrics knew this all along, and they talked about these energies as masculine and feminine, that the more one party can behave in a masculine way and the other can be in a feminine way, the more attraction there'll be. But if they're both being more masculine or both being more feminine, then there's not as much attraction. That language is confusing, especially in the way that we understand society today and the fact that we have all of these parts inside of us.
Yeah.
And so what I love about kink is it offers non-gendered language around polarity. There's the dom and the sub. Anyone can be a dom and anyone can be a sub. But the degree to which one person becomes more dominant and the other becomes more submissive, you create more tension between the two of them and there's more attraction. That's what polarity is.
I love that. So, and you have, so you also work as a dom.
Yes.
That is so exciting to hear. What have you learned about people and humans in that work?
People almost always want what they don't have in their life. So who wants to be submissive the most? You said it, it's the CEOs, right? And I think it's more typical to have female doms because you have more men in positions of power.
Right.
But as we're moving into a world where women hold these high positions of power and they're very dominant in their life, they're craving submission. And so one of the typical clients that I'll work with is these high-powered women that are just, I don't want to make another decision today.
Yeah.
I don't want to make another choice. I don't want to make just you hold me, you lead me, you guide me. I just want to let go and surrender. And they don't have a lot of spaces to do that. You can go and get a massage and get a spa and have a sense of surrender, or you can have a scene.
Yeah.
And so that's a typical thing. Whereas when I look at relationships where one person, let's say, has more of a financial success than the other, it's almost always the person that doesn't have the same level of success in their life, they want to be more dominant. They want to claim that.
Yeah.
And the person with who's got that, they're like, yeah, I'll happily be submissive.
Yes,
Like, let me let go.
Yes.
So people are craving to have an experience that's different than what they have. And then there's every now and then there's people who live in their shadows, who are control freaks everywhere, and they think that that I should be dominant too. It's like, okay, let's taste submission and let's see what that feels like to you.
It's the opposite. Do you feel like couples that have a different patterned relationship in life, but they want to explore the opposites in bed?
Yeah.
And does that happen a lot as well?
It is a pattern that I see, and there does, from the patterns that I've seen, tend to be gendering around it to a certain degree. Definitely, all hetero couples that I've worked with, because I worked with a lesbian couple as well, but all hetero couples that I've seen, the woman wants at least some of the time submissive, even if she's looking to explore dominance.
Right.
So that's an interesting thing that I see. They all sometimes want to be held in the experience. It could be switchy, like we want to try both. But definitely, if she's a more, like I said, a high-powered woman, she almost always wants to be more in the submissive.
type of thing.
And what was fun about working with queer couples is that there is no societal indication of who should be in what role,
Yeah.
and there's more openness to switchiness. And I think
Yes.
that we are all inherently switchy, except where our shadows prevent it. Even me as a professional dom, I love a good experience as a submissive. There's
Yeah.
so much beauty to be held in that way.
Yeah.
And I love that experience. It really helps me grow. It helps to inform me.
Yes.
And honestly, I believe that anyone who really wants to be dominant in their life should have an experience of submission to know what that feels like and to
Yes.
help orient the person you're with towards that experience.
Yes.
My first few experiences in kink were in a submissive role. It's easier to enter in a submissive role because the experienced person guides you.
Right, right. Because you have to like also let yourself the control, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people exceed control also during sex.
Control is the enemy of power.
It is, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
True power comes when you let go of control. Control is where people go to when they feel they don't have power. I'm like, oh, I'm out of control, so I
So
need
I'm
to
gonna
seize
grab it.
control. I'm going to grab it. And that does the opposite of what it's intended to do.
Yes. I love that you said that about gay people because that has been my experience too with, I had taught a couple of workshops with LGBTQ people, and I do see how easier, even though because I use Tantra, I do use the feminine and masculine, they don't seem to reject any of it. You know, they seem to be like, oh yeah, it's like sometimes I'm that, sometimes I'm that, and
Yeah.
like that person. When I go with men are like, no,
Yeah.
don't have feminine energy, you know? And so
Right.
it is interesting, like that is another approach to actually getting into that, the submissive. And I still feel like there's a lot of shadow within a lot of men of submission.
Yes.
And do you feel like it's because it's the control thing? Why do you, or it's a societal thing of like men should never be in a submission position of what that entails? Like, what do you think that
Yeah, I
is?
mean, intergenerationally and historically, people in submissive positions were taken advantage of people in dominant positions in society.
Yeah.
Power dynamics exist in our society.
Yeah.
You know, there's people who've owned other people, who've enslaved other people, who've raped other people, who've stolen from other people. It's always the person with more power takes from the person with less power. And women have always been in a position of less power than men.
Yeah.
So for them, submission isn't something that's strange or weird. They might not want it non-consensually,
Yeah.
which makes sense, but it's not unfamiliar in the way that it is to a lot of men.
Yeah.
And so that becomes very scary.
Yeah.
But that's only because we haven't had enough blueprints of safe submission in our society because of the lack of consent with which it happens in society.
Right.
But there's places in your life where if you're not submissive, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
If you're really sick and you're going to the doctor,
Yeah.
you need to be submissive to the doctor. You need to be led by the doctor. You need to go into their experience. You're not the expert. They're the expert. Let them lead you. Right? So there's places, and that's always the example that I'll give a man who's like, no, I need to be dominant everywhere in my life. I'll bring the doctor example, or you're going to a massage. You want to be in charge of your own massage?
Are you like giving
You
the
wanna
masseuse a
micromanage it?
massage as they're giving
Yeah.
it to you? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's we don't have that concept of safety and submissive. There,
Yes.
even like the word itself, you know, it's used as a bad term in society outside
Yeah.
of the bedroom. You know, it's like, oh, she's submissive to him. You know, it's like a ew, like
Yeah.
blah, blah. In life, or like, oh no, she's a very submissive woman. You know, like that's like we use it in the negative constantly.
Yes.
So it's really hard to take it out of the negative and being like, oh no, it can be actually a positive thing.
Which is so funny because we understand that from a spiritual perspective that one of the best qualities to have as a person is surrender.
Yeah.
And surrender is the gift of submission.
Yes.
Right? And so if we don't surrender, because there's things that are outside of our control.
Yeah.
No matter how powerful a person you are,
Without
there's
doubt.
things you don't get a control around your health, around like certain like bigger world things.
Death.
And death. And you'll be a victim to it
Yeah.
unless you learn to submit to it and surrender to it.
Yeah.
That's why there's so many books about that. Surrender is a path of ease through life.
Yes.
And that is the gift of submission.
That's beautiful. I bet a lot of people do get that experience of like, I surrender in this space so I can surrender more in my life. Like being comfortable with the surrendering of it.
Now you're getting to the whole reason for why I do everything that I do. I see sexuality as a lens through which we can fix everything in our life.
Yeah.
When
I always say what you do in the bedroom, you do in life, and what you do in life, you do in the bedroom.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Having a safe experience of surrender in the bedroom, tied up in rope, you can't move, someone else is taking care of your safety, you relax into it, you learn, you let go, can be very meditative and create this felt sense that you can then hone on to in other parts of your life. It's like, oh, that's the feeling I want to have. How do I duplicate that somewhere else?
That is so beautiful. Do people, I bet people don't realize that when they look into this space and they're like, oh, I'm just doing it because I want to do this. And then they're like, oh my God, my life is transforming in this other way for doing that. What are other gifts that you can see conscious kink giving people like that?
It's really endless with conscious kink. Well, that's what I love about it. I think that conscious kink is one of the best way to do embodied parts work. So if you've heard of internal family systems or any of these other practices, there's this ideas that we have different parts that speak to us. And in any scene, you can choose to give voice to one of those parts and completely act it out. And I think that's one of the biggest gifts of conscious kink, that you can be this one part of yourself and completely embody it 100% and listen to what it starts speaking to when it's the only one speaking, when it's not being argued with all the other voices, when it's not being managed and controlled, and just this voice speaks.
Yeah.
And that can be in the dominant or the submissive position.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a part of you that's really like mean and cruel. That's great as in a sadistic scene as a dominant to bring that forward. There's another part of you that's a little baby that needs to be taken care of. That's a great in a submissive
like it
role.
just can't fully come out.
And just be that.
All the voices.
And be that all the way. And listen and learn what happens in those dynamics.
Yes.
And learn more about yourself.
Do you feel like people in a safe space, does the shame get removed? Like, let's say somebody's acting out that thing, or saying horrific things because that's their part of themselves, and are like purging almost, this part of themselves and giving themselves permission to be that, to be messy and to be ugly and to be whatever it is that you want to be. Once it's done, right, the session, let's say, how do the people not grab their shame back in and put it back on?
Well, I think that when done intentionally, like this is what we're walking into, it does release the hold of shame on it. Because shame is a voice inside of you that says, you're wrong. Guilt says you did something wrong. Shame is like, you're wrong. You're wrong for being this. This part of you is broken. This part of you is there's something wrong with it. But then you show up to the scene in it, and because it was intentional and conscious, and there's love behind it, even if it doesn't look like love in the scene, but there is love behind the crafting of the scene. And then in the aftercare, you're sitting and you're cuddling together, you had this beautiful scene, and you're like, wow, I was loved and taken care of, even as a victim, even as a sadist. That part of me helped us to have a juicier connection. So it releases the shame around it, because it's like, oh, maybe it's not that wrong.
Yes. Maybe it's not that wrong. Yes.
Maybe
I love that you call them
right.
scenes, which is reminding me, because I also do entertainment, which is reminding me of that part, right? When you're like with somebody that you really care about, like an actor friend, or it can be your partner or whatever, and you're going to act out a scene, right? That is like, I'm breaking up with you, or I'm like, or I cheated on you, or like whatever it is. And we're fully involved and we're crying and we're screaming and da 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 da. But then afterwards it's like, but because you trust the other person in the scene, right? The other actor in the scene. And then afterwards you're like, you feel satisfied and you feel good. Like, oh, we did good work. Like, we released something. That's why acting can be extremely therapeutic, although it shouldn't be used for therapeutic purposes, but it can be extremely therapeutic because you're acting certain parts of, my mom will always be like, why do you want to act all this like drug addicts and da 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 da? I'm like, there's a part of me that is like, really gets off on, experiencing pain in emotional way. And really diving into what would that be like, but I don't feel, it's interesting because I don't feel shame in that aspect at all. I feel pride.
Yes.
But I've been in a couple of like where afterwards I still feel like maybe I shouldn't have done that, or maybe like this should be a secret of like this kink that I have within like da 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 da, you know. And I don't know if it's shame or it's just like me keeping something for myself in that kind of a sense.
I think there's just sometimes a danger in not knowing.
Yeah.
And when it's something that's interacted with someone else, not knowing if it's going to be okay. Like I can think of, it's funny, I wish I knew and I had access to conscious kink when I was in my 20s living in Miami. I was in a relationship. And she was Dominican, and so it's that like fiery energy. And I remember she would get angry sometimes, and because I've done like all this, or even back then, so much personal development work, I'd like, okay, let's listen to your feelings. And she'd be like, next time I'm like that, I need you to slap me and then kiss me. And in my mind at the time, it's
You're
like,
like, what the fuck?
I can't
do that.
slap you. I can't just slap you. Now, if I had access to conscious kink at the time and I understood that, then I
like,
know that we've consented to this and we've created a
Yes,
scene.
yes.
And then, like, oh, yeah, that would be a fun way to play with that energy.
Yes.
And sometimes that would happen. I never went to that because I had like this story of like, oh, you definitely do not hit a woman. So
Yeah.
I didn't do that ever non-consensually, but I remember there was times where she'd be emotional and then she just needed to be fucked.
Yeah.
She just needed to be fucked.
Yeah.
And I realized that, and that like helped
like, oh,
release
that
everything.
energy. Yeah.
Right, but you don't know, you're taking a chance.
Right.
Right, you don't know if this person's going to take it while some other person might not.
Right.
So what the scene does is you do a negotiation ahead of time.
You create, yeah.
And you create the safety because everyone knows we're on the same page.
Yes,
And then there's an
yes.
agreement, not just for the scene, but maybe for the whole relationship, that this is something that you can do to me
Yes.
every time or anytime you want, or anytime in this particular situation is a negotiation. Now I feel safe to be expressed.
Love that.
Yeah.
So when people are looking for conscious kink, where do you feel like they should look out for? The same as
Yeah.
like Tantra, because it could also be a dangerous place maybe
Yeah.
if you are in the wrong space. And so what are the signs of a good space where they will take care of you?
So although there are spaces in kink that are also problematic, just like in Tantra, I would say that there are more safe spaces in kink. And there's a lot of dungeons that you can go to, or parties you can go to that do kink without sex. So if you want to like first explore there, and they have a lot of rules around it. Notice also when you're connecting with a dom, how much are they actually communicating with you before? If they're right away wanting to jump into experiences before teaching you, before telling you about it, before negotiating, it's probably not a good sign. Do you feel regulated in your nervous system around them? When you're negotiating, before the meeting, you should feel very regulated. You might get dysregulated in the scene, and that's fun, but before you should feel very safe. There should be talk about desires and boundaries. That's just as important. If the person's not asking for what your boundaries are, problematic. If they're not giving you safe words, problematic. If there's no, like, a good way to do kink also in the beginning is like maybe around other people, right? Like maybe you do it at an event, or maybe you have a friend around so that it feels safe.